I'm going to take you inside the courtroom for the oral arguments for Sean Diddy Combs' appeal, which happened on Thursday, April 9th, and it was pretty long. Generally, each side, the defense and the government, they get 10 minutes to say what they want to say. And a lot of the times they will take 8 minutes and then reserve 2 minutes for a rebuttal, which is what Alexandra Shapiro, Diddy's attorney, had said to the judges when she first got up there. But things took forever and each side ended up getting more time. I mean, we were there for almost 2 hours. It was pretty wild. And what I'm going to do today is a little bit different, I guess, if you watch this channel, which I hope you do. I made a video outside of the courthouse right after the hearing. I read from my notebook. I gave all of my thoughts, just again, right off the bat while they were very fresh. So I'm going to play a majority of that, but I'll first just set the scene a little bit. Diddy was not present, but almost all of his attorneys were, his trial attorneys, I mean. Of course, Alexandra Shapiro, she is his appellate lawyer. And actually, one of his trial attorneys, Nicole Westmoreland, joined the team as of this week, I believe. So she was there. Yes, they were both there. But also, we saw Mark Agnifilo and his wife, Karen. Karen is the lead attorney for Luigi Mangione. We saw Xavier Donaldson, Anna Esteveo, and we actually saw Brian Steele. I'm a big fan of Brian Steele, so I was super happy to see him. And Diddy's, his mom wasn't there. His kids were not there. However, his sister and her husband were there, along with a friend that I saw at the trial pretty much every day. But yeah, at the heart of this argument from the defense is that Judge Subramanian sentenced Diddy on, quote, acquitted conduct. So as a refresher, Diddy was convicted on 2 counts of the Mann Act, which is transportation to engage in prostitution. That was the lesser of what he was charged with. He was acquitted on the major charges of trafficking. I don't say the full word so YouTube doesn't block me, and also racketeering. So when the judge sentenced him to basically 50 months or 4 years behind bars, he had cited some enhancements, basically. And citing these enhancements, he basically said, I'm allowed to do that because this is essentially overlapping conduct. And what that means is, and I guess to put it as sort of a whole, to put a bow on it, the defense is saying, well, he was acquitted on the conduct of coercion, let's say, because that is an element of trafficking. You have to coerce one of the women, Cassie or Jane, and he was found not guilty of that. So you can't sentence him based on some of these coercion tactics, which they had argued were plying the women with drugs and beating them and this and that. We saw the intercontinental video of Cassie Ventura, which is really, really disturbing. However, Combs was acquitted with everything having to do with coercion as it pertains to trafficking. So that is the core argument and what the government is saying about Subramanian. And back to what I was mentioning about the overlapping conduct, the judges read, there's 3 federal judges that the lawyers go before in the Second Circuit, and they were reading from the transcript of Subramanian when he was sentencing, where he would say, well, and I'm obviously paraphrasing, he didn't talk about the victim grouping enhancement because he recognized that there was some ambiguity behind it, because the jury technically did not find Cassie and Jane to be, quote, a victim when it came to the charges. So again, what is allowed is judges can use overlapping conduct, which technically the gray area is, was it overlapping or was it acquitted? So that's what they had to argue. Like I said, I'll play some of my video. And I just want to also point out that Christy Slavic for the government, who was arguing, she had said, well, this is not acquitted conduct that he was sentenced on. This was admitted conduct because the defense and Combs himself admitted to quote, plying women with drugs and, beating them. We all saw the video, whatever. Well, then Alexandra Shapiro was, no, that is not admitted conduct. We admitted to domestic violence, but we did not admit to, quote, plying women with drugs. Now, what I'll say about that being in the courtroom, I was there. It's very clear that Combs introduced Cassie to the drugs that she eventually became addicted to. She became addicted to opioids. She had to go to rehab because of this. And she testified herself that she started to do drugs, procure drugs on her own without Combs. And he was even concerned at certain points. However, he introduced her, and she had to take these drugs to get through the freak-offs. That's sort of what got her through. So again, it's like, it's tough. I mean, the judge himself, Judge Nardini, he even said this is extremely difficult. This case is very difficult. It's very gray. The lines are gray. And another thing I'll point out is what they said to the guy, during your case, and these judges, they knew the case really well. They're like, during your case, you treated the Mann Act as sort of an afterthought. Your whole case during trial focused on trafficking and racketeering. And then, on all of your evidence presented was based on trafficking and racketeering. And then when it came to the Mann Act, you guys were like, hey, here's some charts and graphs that shows that escort B flew to destination A, whatever. And, I thought that was interesting because, again, sitting through the trial, that kind of is what happened, where we saw all this evidence, all of these witnesses, as it pertains to racketeering and trafficking. And then it was like 3 days of really boring charts and graphs read by a summary witness who was like someone that worked, for the feds. Chrissy Slavic did push back a little bit and say, well, we did have Jane talk about one instance in those charts. So that sort of added to the evidence. So, it is what it is. But I will just play this. Oh, and the judge obviously reserved his right to decide, or their right to decide. But Shapiro did ask if they could decide quickly because Sean Combs has been in prison since September of 2024, his arrest. Let me just fast forward through some of it. I'm only going to play a little bit of it, and then I'll just play the judges leaving court because that's always kind of fun. Diddy update. I am outside. All right, did not rule from the bench. They are, reserving that. And Alexandra Shapiro at the end kind of said, we really hope that, we can get a decision sooner than later. And I'm paraphrasing here. But, she got up there and just started off by really saying that, we want to cite our support of the jury and what a jury decides. And we want to respect the law and what the law is. And then the judge kind of interrupts, and this is Nardini, interrupts and says, are you going to go into like violations of the Sixth Amendment? And she's like, I mean, I not now, I wasn't going to, but I can sort of, I can sort of pivot there. And then they bring up a case that they're citing and everything. And it's Vaughn and Johnson, which is in her 100-page brief. But basically, the judge wanted to go into the fact that, and he read from Judge Subramanian's the transcript when he was going through the sentencing, saying, he did to, giving drugs to these women. I feel like I told you everything. Elements. And she said, yes, that's what he was doing. So if he were to sentence Combs on, a coercion element, or because of coercion, like that should not be allowed because he was acquitted of coercion under different predicate acts. So they bring up the Cannes Film Festival travel, which is when, and this was Nardini who brought this up. They seem to be kind of stuck on this for a minute. This is Nardini brings up the Cannes Film Festival travel and how Cassie and Combs are flying back to New York, and he's like squeezing her leg, and he seems to be threatening her, and showing her or showing people a freak off video of her, which is, he's kind of blackmailing her and saying, I will show this if you don't do what I say or something like that, whatever. So they go back to New York, they have dinner, and then they decide, or he decides that they are going to do an FO. And this was, I guess, connected to the Mann Act for whatever reason, I guess because they were, the government says, and the judge was sort of laying it out there, because they traveled from point A to point B to engage in a commercial sex act. And Shapiro's like, what? No, that is not what happened. You're acting like they only traveled from France to New York to engage in this commercial sex act, when that's not what happened. They were simply returning to New York. They went to dinner, and then they decided, or he decided, that, you know, they were going to have this freak off. Okay. I'm going to stop there. That was a huge part of the arguments, is that whole travel from Cannes to New York, because again, the government had one view of it and the defense had another view of it. So let me just go to this. How's it going?
Good. How's everyone
Mark
doing?
Good. How do you think it went?
We'll see.
Sorry. Is that as big as it gets? Jeez. All right.
Hi, everybody.
How's it going?
Good. How's everyone doing?
Good. How do you think it went? My voice.
We'll see. Lots of argument, lots of great questions from the judges.
How's Diddy doing?
Shapiro, Nicole Westmoreland behind her. Hi, Alexandra. Great job. How do you think it went? How are you feeling?
She did a great job. She did a good job.
Good job.
Great job.
Great job.
When are you going to brief Mr. Combs on everything on today? Yeah, she didn't want to talk at all, but that is fine. She definitely had some fangirls and fanboys out there. People were asking to take photos with her. It was pretty wild. But I don't know when we're going to expect a decision. But once again, the judge did say this is very difficult. And I don't mean, you know, like difficult as in like it's just, again, there's so much gray area. And he said there's questions that we need to ask in this case that we really could ask federally as a whole, as it pertains to the law. And it might be time to, you know, change some things with the Mann Act law. It is a little bit strange. It does feel a little bit outdated, but what do I know? Anyway, guys, I hope you liked this briefing. I hope it was helpful to you. I hope it was unbiased. And again, in a, I guess, from a lay perspective, because I am not an attorney, but I am Lauren Conlin from Los Angeles Magazine. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you all on Monday.